Here's a breakdown how the Lebanese banking system collapsed. First, we go to year 1966. There was an intrabank, 300 branches globally, 15% of Lebanese banking assets, and the collapse triggered a bank run and exposed lack of central bank liquidity support. We will say in this video why this happened, and the Lebanese GDP contraction in 1966 67 was 5%. Now, during the Lebanese Civil War, 75 till 1990, estimated loss was 25 billion. GDP shrank by more than 50% because Beirut, the capital of Lebanon, was fully destroyed, and the Lebanese lira did spike for 3,000 from 3.25 to 2,500, and then they stabilized it at 1,500 for a long time. Now, after Intrabank, in 2009-2011, Lebanese-Canadian bank scandal, which was laundering more than 250 million in suspicious transaction for militias, not only this militia but other militias also, and asset frozen, banks sold to SGBL, and signaled major corruption, shadow banking, and lack of oversight, a precursor to the exposure of systematic financial abuse. Now, the Ponzi-like financial engineering by Banque du Liban offered double-digit interest rate, 15% return as interest to attract people to bring money. And we remember the advertisement of this bank, don't worry, we worry instead of you, don't plan, we plan for you. And it was just a Ponzi scam schema, because now we know that all these banks did bankrupted. The Central Bank of Lebanon used circular money movement between commercial bank and itself to hide the deficit. So, which means he was taking public money and then reborrowing it to the country to the government to hide the collapse. And public debt reached 90 billion, and it was more than what Lebanon can handle, because it became 175% of its GDP by 2019. Foreign reserves were depleted despite official claims, which means a lot of money did run out of the country, and the exchange rate was bridged at 1,500 artificially for over 20 years, which means just to hide the corruption. In October 2019, the collapse started happening. Mass protest against corruption, austerity, and taxes, because people of Lebanon got fed up with corruption because they live in poverty. Banks imposed informal capital control overnight. Lira began to free fall to go to its real value, which was held artificially at 1,500, and it reached in 2024 $100,000, 100,000 Lebanese lira per dollar. By numbers, GDP fell from 55 billion in 2018, 18 billion by 2021. Over 80% of the population right now live in poverty. Inflation peaked at over 200% annual in 2022, and unemployment 40%. Lebanese banks, in a fraudulent way, froze 100 billion in deposits of private sector and people, mostly in small and middle class savers. Electricity available for only 1-2 hour day in many areas, just due to corruption in all the Lebanese government. Now, ChatGPT gave us a summary table. Interbank 15% of asset banking crisis. Civil war 75 to 90, 25 billion lost. It's a small number if you ask my opinion, but if we're talking about the 70s and the 80s, so this 25 billion should be like times 4 in our time, because the US dollar lost its value. Lebanese Canadian bank scandal, 25 million per month laundered, US sanctions, Central Bank of Beirut enter in a Ponzi schema of 15% inflated interest, in a way like the Ponzi schema is like they give you interest, but at the same time there is no income to pay the interest. So 15% to reach 100%, it takes just few years, and the reserve gone according to this. And 2019 to 2014 crisis, Lebanese lira devaluation, 99% to 80% poverty, collapse of the middle class. Now, for the big picture to be very clear, why Intrabank did collapse in 1966? Intrabank control, as we said before, 15% of Lebanese deposits, owned hotels, airlines, and had major international investment. Its founder was and CEO was Yosef Beidas, a Palestinian origin Christian Greek Orthodox, which Maronite didn't like. He had no strong political party backing, especially not from the Maronite elite who dominated political and financial power. Banque du Liban was created by the Maronites in 1964, and a Maronite named Lies Sarkis was controlling it. When Intrabank faced liquidity in 1966 crisis, Banque du Liban, which means the Central Bank of Beirut, refused to provide lender of last resort support, which means helicopter money, how the Federal Reserve Bank of the US did in 2008 financial crisis. And tough central bank are supposed to do that, but the Maronite Bank, which is the Central Bank of Lebanon, didn't do that. And private banks and elite lobbied against bailing Intra, claiming it would corrupt the system. And then, Centurion and political undertones, Beidas was seen as an outsider because he's not Lebanese, he's Palestinian, who challenged the Maronite banking elite, who was rising from 1914 famine and poverty to become bankers. After Intra collapsed, its assets were redistributed, and Maronite-led banks like France Bank, SGBL, and Bank of Beirut rose in dominance on the ruins of Intrabank. And a lot of researchers say Beida's fall was orchestrated to reduce Palestinian influence and centralize banking power under Maronite control. Even the Hariri family, which are the Sunni Muslim billionaires of Lebanon, years later viewed Intra collapse as political. Long-term effect: due to the collapse of Intrabank, all the world lost trust in the banking sector of Lebanon from the 60s, even before civil war happened. It shattered investor trust, especially among Arab Gulf investors. The Maronite-dominated financial elite gained almost full control of Lebanon economy, and as karma, everything collapsed after years. The message was power matters more than economic soundness, which is full stupidity. So yes, there's strong evidence that the collapse of Intrabank was not purely financial. It was political because the Maronites blocked the Orthodox Palestinian, who in reality lived many years in Lebanon, but in Lebanon you don't get the nationality as a Lebanese because due to racism, and especially Maronite racism. And then Beida's Palestinian origin and lack of Maronite protection likely sealed the bank fate. And this was a brief, fast story of the corruption of the banking system in Lebanon, which started in the 60s and not after the civil war.